Okay, hello, welcome back. Transhumanism. So this is the final lecture topic that I'm going to be doing as a screencast, unless there are any other topics that you would really like me to cover. Send me an email and we can talk about that. Not a problem. And that goes for anything sci-fi fantasy, but also if there are any topics about writing and craft that you think would be helpful to have more guidance on, just let me know. I'm going to open with this hilarious little tweet that I saw. It's only quarantine if it's from the quarantine province of France. Otherwise, it's just sparkling isolation, self-isolation. And I found this a few days ago, but after last night's statement from the government, I think it's become slightly more fitting. I hope everyone is safe, everyone's at home and not getting cabin fever. So, there isn't really any more to say on that. And unfortunately, we all have an awful lot of time and far too much to do, which means that probably none of us will do any of it, because that's the way these things always work. So transhumanism. What is transhumanism? It's a concept, but it's also, more than that, it's actually a political movement. I'm going to introduce you to the joys of the politics of transhumanism. Thinking a bit about how it moves beyond cyborgs and robots and androids that we talked about recently. Is this technology already here? Is it something that is already upon us? And then the politics, the political movement itself, and what that might mean for social change. So here's a definition. Let me just move myself down a little bit. There we go. From 1990. Transhumanism is a class of philosophies of life that seek the continuation and acceleration of the evolution of intelligent life beyond its currently human form and human limitations by means of science and technology, guided by life-promoting principles and values. So, transhumanists believe that the end point of human evolution has not come. As we are now is not the end point of our evolution, our existence on this planet. There are ways of pushing us beyond what we currently have. And that's going to take new scientific technologies, new developments, but that all of this should be guided by life-promoting principles. Now, that's not the same as being pro-life. That's a very different kind of argument. But life-promoting, thinking about how to extend the lifespan of existing humans, how to create healthier, longer living, better living humans. So not just having retirement homes full of 150-year-olds who can basically do very little, but actually having people who are living much longer and living better. So life promoting in that sense. And this is from 1990, so it's a part of philosophy, a way of thinking about life that has been around for quite some time, but only recently do we have the technologies to support what might be thought of as transhuman. It's promoting an interdisciplinary approach to understanding and evaluating the opportunities for enhancing the human condition and the human organism opened up by the advancement of technology. So, I'm going to break this one down. An interdisciplinary approach to understanding and evaluating opportunities. It's not just, do we have the science to do this? Do we have the technology to do this? It's also that question of, should we do this? How are we going to ethically and properly do this so that it becomes an opportunity for enhancing the human condition, not just pushing it further and doing more with it. This way of putting it reminds me of the difference between the humanities and STEM as encapsulated in Jurassic Park. So science can tell you how to clone a dinosaur, the humanities can tell you why that might not be the best idea. And this interdisciplinary approach is absolutely crucial because philosophy, ethics, theology, sociology How are people going to react to this? How is this going to become a thing? Should this become a thing? These are all really important questions beyond, can we do this? Probably. Should we do this? Well, considers both present technologies, genetic engineering and IT, and anticipated ones, molecular, nanotechnology and AI. So, transhumanism is thinking about what we already have, and there's two examples: genetic engineering, information technologies, and anticipated ones, which I think are actually here. Molecular nanotechnology, building tiny, tiny little machines, tiny little robots, and artificial intelligence too. So it's not just thinking about what have we got and what are we doing with it, it's what are we going to have in the foreseeable future. We know what technologies we have now, we know what research is being done. In 5 years, what are we going to have? In 10 years, in 20 years? So it's really quite a forward-thinking way of doing science and ethics and interdisciplinarity. Now here are some of the things that transhumanists are interested in. Radical extension of the human health span. And this is the term that's going to be used throughout, health span. We're not talking about lifespan. We don't, that's not a term that they use, it's health span. How can we promote humans being healthier and able to exist independent, healthy lives for longer? So it's not, can we keep someone alive to 100, it's can we keep someone up and running until 100. It's very different. The eradication of disease. The elimination of unnecessary suffering. So that means not only being able to cure or treat diseases, but also making sure that those technologies, those treatments are as ethical and as well put together to limit suffering as possible. The augmentation of human intellectual, physical and emotional capacity. So making it so that we can run faster, think better, and also emote, understand, empathise, sympathise, not just making us cold, mindless, speed-running geniuses, but making us fully rounded humans who can emote and understand others while also being better physically and mentally. Space colonisation. Because, cool, why not? Why wouldn't we want to do that? And the possibility of creating super intelligent machines. So those robots, those androids that can pass the Turing test, that can do things as humans would do them, which doesn't just mean being a maths whiz, it means being a maths whiz who understands the ethical implications of being a maths whiz. Transhumanists view human nature as a work in progress. Current humanity need not be the end point. So there are opportunities for us to go further, to do more and to be more. Again, some more transhumanist values, things that someone who believes in this kind of philosophy is going to be interested in. And I should also point out that at this point I'm thinking about trans as having nothing to do with transgenderism. Apologise if that wasn't necessarily clear to start with, but trans in this instance does not mean transgender. It means transhuman, the coming together of different technology and science and the organic to make something that is beyond human as we currently understand. So the opportunity to explore the transhuman and post-human realms. Post-human, again, is a term that's quite often used, going beyond what it is to be just human. There are implications for global security, technological progress, and wide access. So everyone having access to this, not just being the haves, but actually everyone. There's nothing wrong with tampering with nature. We have the technology, therefore we should use it. But they're also largely a pacifist group. So the proliferation of weapons of mass destruction, not using this technology to benefit armies, but to benefit everyone. It will improve understanding. They are very much in favour of pushing scientific education and critical education to make it so that everyone can take part in these debates. We do not have scientific illiteracy in a transhumanist situation. In a transhumanist society, everyone will be able to understand and discuss. A willingness to re-examine assumptions. Wow, that would be absolutely stellar, actually, to think as we go along, okay, we've got this, we need to reassess. We need to be constantly thinking, constantly updating our thinking. And that is something that we struggle with as a society. We tend to think that rules are set in stone. And I'm not thinking of any particular rules because I don't want to make any politically divisive comments. But an example that might not necessarily be too difficult for y'all to understand. The Second Amendment hasn't been reassessed since muskets were a thing, cannons, and that's an idea, a suggestion of how re-examining assumptions could drastically change the way that we engage with technologies, if we think of firearms as a technology. Diversity. So pushing for diversity, and also doing a lot of things in life-saving technology, life-developing technologies. Okay. But is it already here? Do we already have the technologies that are making transhumanism a reality? Here are some examples of different ones that might come to mind. Bioprinting. So printing, using a 3D printer to print skin, for example. Skin can be created in that kind of way. It's grown on a mesh, usually. Creating a body part without having a straight transplant. Vaccinations, massive. Very big topic of conversation, especially at the moment. Especially as a lot of countries are moving towards mandatory vaccination, especially for children who are going to be taking part in state-funded education. They have to have their vaccines up to date. And there are a lot of people who are not necessarily against vaccines, but are very sceptical and would prefer that this were not the case. But is that vaccination actually a part of transhumanism? It's using technology, it's using science to augment the body, to give us an immunity that we wouldn't necessarily have, and to increase our lifespan. Gender transitioning. So I know that this isn't the term that is typically used. So I can't think of one that would be all-encompassing for all the different surgeries, but the types of technology that are used to assist trans folk, and I trans in the other meaning, with their dysmorphia, with living in a different gender expression. So that kind of technology, incredibly complex scientific developments in this field. When it comes to the basic surgeries, let alone the sort of psychological and emotional understandings, which I don't know if they are particularly advanced at the moment. But the science of the basic surgeries, incredibly complex. And it's giving people a way of moving between identities, augmenting their bodies to fit, so that there isn't a disjunction between sex and gender, or however we might want to codify that. And it could potentially be seen as part of the transhumanist push. Wearable and smart tech. I know a lot of people who wear a Fitbit, who have a device that they wear that will measure their heart rate or whatever. I also know people who have implants that link to blood sugar monitors. So they have a little, usually on the upper arm, little diode thing you hold an app next to it and it reads your blood sugar. Completely fascinating. Brilliant way of doing it. But that, again, augmenting the body, making something easier to live with, and potentially prolonging life as well, if it helps to better monitoring of health. Designer babies. So here's one that people get very hot about, because when we think about designer babies, we tend to think about someone ticking a form saying, I want a blonde-haired, blue-eyed, intelligent, slim girl. And that isn't what designer babies are. There are two ways to think about it. There is that sort of designing certain genes to make it more likely that you'll have a blonde child, or a blue-eyed child, or a smart child, or an athletic child. But really, what it can be thought of in terms of technologies we currently have is using things like amniocentesis, which is testing the amniotic fluid in which the baby sort of sits. I'm gesturing at my stomach here, like you can see it. And testing that fluid to see if the child is likely to have any medical conditions that can be tested that way. Down syndrome is one, trisomy 23 and 21, whichever. And other genetic conditions can often be tested in that way. And sometimes this means that parents have to face the difficult decision of whether or not to continue with the pregnancy. So that kind of designer baby, it's not how we think of selfish, shallow person wanting pretty child. It's how can I use this technology to best give my potential child the best in life, and also how can I help myself as well, which sounds selfish, but really is a horrible decision to have to make. Advanced prosthetics. There's an example photo just there of an arm. This individual has no fingers, but the way that the arm is linked, the prosthetic arm is linked to his arm, means that his fingers can be used, flexed. It's fascinating. And these kind of advanced prosthetics, using nerve endings and bodily electrical impulses to control them, amazing. Sort of a cyborg way of doing things, because it does link to the nervous system and brain functioning. But they are an example of augmenting the body and also promoting longevity of life. Xeno, allo, and auto transplantation. So a bit of Greek here: xeno, foreign; allo, other; and auto, self. So either transplanting in someone else's organs, or in the case of xeno transplantation, often a pig organ is used. Anyone who grew up in the UK in the 2000s may have watched Pig Heart Boy, TV series on the BBC, about a boy who had a heart-lung transplant, and it was a pig's heart that was used. And that's been very, very successful in a huge number of cases. Auto-transplantation is when your own body part is used, and it's often for skin grafts. Skin will be taken from one part of your body and used to put onto another. So in the cases of burns, it's often used for that, although growing skin is now being used for that too. Virtual retinal display, those contact lenses that you see in sci-fi films when people can then see like a little computer screen in front of them. Black Mirror uses it quite a lot. Is a thing that might come to be. This picture down at the bottom is of Google Glass, which is just naff and didn't catch on because it's naff and everyone thought it was naff. But it might become a thing. And cryonics, so freezing bits of you, often all of you. So far, hasn't worked, and I don't believe it's true that Walt Disney was frozen, but the only example I can think of where it is successful is Futurama, and that's, not real. So, let me just, I've gone too far, hang on a minute, previous. So transhumanism as politics. Transhumanists, there is a party, the Transhumanist Party, and this is their logo here, this lovely H+, Humans Plus. And here are some of their policies. Now, again, I don't wish to push political beliefs onto anyone, but I do think that some of these are quite interesting and could be worked up in a non-transhumanist society. No MP may take any other paid work during their term in Parliament. The state pension and retirement age to be abolished. Those who cannot work will instead be entitled to claim state benefits. So all of those sprightly 85-year-olds who are still completely fine and still want to work will be allowed to. But those who have potentially debilitating disabilities or chronic medical conditions and aren't able to work and are, say, 35, they will be allowed to claim benefits. The state will provide full grants to all citizen students, which I think is how Germany does it, actually. University is free up to PhD in Germany, I think. I might have to check that with Carsten. No culturally divisive education is to be supported by the taxpayer. So faith schools and schools that promote a certain political or religious angle on things are not to receive any state funding. Okay. New technologies which can significantly reduce educational and health system costs and improve performance of those systems will be subsidised by the government in order to encourage swift adoption. So, for example, a new type of here's one, actually, cyberknife. So in the robot lecture, I talked about cyberknife, which can be very, very successful in doing simple removal surgeries, things like appendectomies. That would be subsidised in order for the government, in order for healthcare professionals to start using cyberknife more, because it could improve performance and reduce costs. And both education and health are two systems that transhumanists and a lot of others believe should never be for profit because that damages the service. So this way of doing things would ensure that they were not for profit, but were also potentially cutting costs. So these are some of the main policies. And these are all policies that the Transhumanist Party in the UK subscribes to. Okay, here is a transhumanist politician, Zoltan Istvan. He's a transhumanist writer, he's also a journalist. He used to work for the National Geographic Channel, and some of his programs are actually very, very good. And he tried running for president in 2016. I haven't updated this lecture recently, I do apologise. And he also ran for governor in California in 2018. He lost both. But he became a very public face of transhumanism. He became very open, and a lot of people started to listen to some of the policies on the basis that he was in the public eye more than previously any other transhumanist politician had been. And I think it's highly unlikely that such an individual will ever take high office because of the way the systems are set up. But you can see how some of the policies are incredibly interesting and could very easily work in a non-transhumanist society. And of course, this is sci-fi. It wouldn't be sci-fi without some laws. And Istvan wrote 3 laws. Always 3. Well, 4 if you count Zeroth as the 4th, for robots. A transhumanist must safeguard one's own existence above all else. It's highly individualistic. Me first. A transhumanist must strive to achieve omnipotence as expediently as possible, so long as one's actions do not conflict with the first law. Okay? And a transhumanist must safeguard value in the universe, so long as they do not conflict with the first and second. I don't know what is being considered value here. I have a feeling that potentially means good and useful, again, difficult word, knowledge over individuals. And there are a lot of problems with these laws. Maybe that's something you'd like to think about on watching this. But we can see how these laws, the individualistic nature, but also the desire to be both omnipotent and also safeguarding value, so learning, I assume is what is meant there, really do coincide with the policies put out by Transhumanist Party and transhumanist politicians. But there are always laws in sci-fi. There are always laws, usually 3. If you're doing some world building and you haven't got laws, maybe you'd like some laws. There's a tip for you. Okay, that's that lecture, that topic. It's a bit about a very important branch of the current way that science and technology is going, especially in relation to politics. And there are a lot of novels where you will see that this kind of understanding of what it means to be human is coming through quite strongly. Not to mention programs like Black Mirror, which have a lot of transhumanism in them. One of the things I would urge you to do, if you're writing that kind of stuff, is to think about the implications of such a system. Not necessarily the science of it or the technology of it, but the ethics of it. If you have a system in which 50% of the population have bionic limbs and implants and all kinds of things that augment them, what does that mean for those who don't? How are such people treated? Is there a way of categorizing people into 2 groups, the haves and the have-nots? And how are they decided? Is it this equitable society that transhumanist politics seems to want? To what extent do existing philosophies, existing religions come to play? Do people who subscribe to certain religious beliefs get excluded on the basis of that? Is there a schism or a coup or whatever you might want to call it that makes Christianity, for example, outlawed because it doesn't fit with transhumanist policies? They're all things to think about, fascinating questions, I think, and I would have loved to have a discussion with you about how the ethics of these types of policies work. So the comments box underneath is open if there's anything you'd like to add, or on Blackboard in the discussion groups, do feel free to talk about this. There's no right or wrong answer. There are answers that people might disagree with, but there's no right or wrong answer. And this is something which is coming. So it's good to have some idea in the back of your mind where you position yourselves in relation to these policies and these ways of thinking about what it is to be human. On that note, adios.